Hey, what's up? Today I have a classic comparison of two high-end headphones that just came out, the Abyss JOAL and the Meze Poet. Both of these are priced right around $2,000 and they are both very good, but in very different ways. And both companies are paying me a substantial amount of money to, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not being paid by either company, of course. All thoughts and opinions, like always, are my own. Let's get into it. In my personal experience and knowing a lot of friends who have products from these companies, I feel a high degree of faith that both of these products will last, but they are built for slightly different purposes, I would say. The Meze is built to be a little bit more of an art piece in terms of the physical design. It's a very comfortable headphone. The ear pads do get a little bit hot for me and you can feel them around the edge of your ear, whereas the Abyss differs a little bit. You can feel it a little bit more on ear and it's got a more proprietary fit. For my head, it actually works perfectly and I find this to be the more comfortable headphone between the two. But because the articulating cups and the deeper cups on the Meze, I think the Meze might be more comfortable for a wider group of people. So for comfort, I think the Meze wins, but both are relatively comfortable enough where I think they'll be fine for most people. When it comes to build quality, these have different approaches. The Meze is a magnesium chassis, not plastic, which is cool. And it does have these steel grills. And as you can see right now, there's like a nice sheen on the grill and it looks very like pristine. These will dent over time. If you hit them with something, they'll dent and you'll never get it undented and looking perfect. So just be like really aware of that. That will affect the resale value if you do go to resell this. So something to think about. Make sure you take care of this and put it on a nice stand or in a desk or something when you're not using it. The Abyss, like all other Abyss headphones, is really truly built to last. And Abyss stands behind that with a included 10-year warranty with a purchase of a JOAL, which is not only crazy, but honestly is kind of where the rest of these ultra expensive headphones should be at. It's sort of embarrassing a lot of other companies, including Meze, who only offers a 2-year for their warranty. Okay, now when it comes to drivability, the Meze is very easy to drive. I would use this off of a MacBook Pro, no problem. You're gonna benefit from a nicer and higher end amp, and I've been using higher end amps to judge both these headphones, but my point is it's very efficient. For example, on the Niche Pietis Maximus, I was almost maxing out on songs regularly with the Abyss, and I was somewhere around kind of 30 to 40% volume output for the Meze. So the Meze is a lot more efficient. I don't know if you'll consider this a pro or con, but that's how it is. When it comes to sound quality, these are very different headphones. They have different focuses and different areas of kind of benefits and drawbacks. And I haven't yet done the full review of the Abyss JOAL, so this will kind of act as a precursor to that review, but I have done a full review of the Meze Poet, and if you haven't watched that, I would click the channel link down below. So I'd break it down like this. To my ear, the Meze seems to be a bit of a warm, bright headphone. It's got a high emphasis on the lower mid-range and mid-bass, and a little bit of a recession into the mid-range and a little bit of a peak when it comes to the treble response. So it comes across detailed, but slightly V-shaped, but in a pretty pleasing way, to be honest. I think a lot of people will hear this and be pretty satisfied with how it sounds. I think the Abyss tailors to a different audience who will prefer something a little bit more neutral and clean, but still want something fun and really, really, really clear. And that's something that the Abyss offers that the Meze is not as good at. So let's start with bass response. Both of these are really good bass headphones actually for planars. They are very kind of hard hitting and very detailed. But when it comes to the detail category and just total ability for you to hear the fidelity of bass, the Abyss is a stand ahead for these two, for sure. When it comes to quantity though, the Meze is a bit harder hitting. It's a bit more dynamic and punchy through its bass and mid-bass and into its lower mid-range, and hits with more authority for its bass response. It just impacts a little bit better. And in my opinion, it has a warmer than neutral bass delivery. Now, what is nice is that it is fairly clean. It doesn't hit with the super bloated sense. It just kind of hits with a nice warmth to it and just feels really, really cozy and kind of lush in the bass. If you listen to a lot of bass heavy music and you consider yourself a bass head, I would immediately start looking at something like the Meze Poet here because it's just really, really good for that type of stuff. Also for a lot of rock music, it provides kind of a nice lower end stage for the drum instruments to kind of pop through and hit with a bit more authority, especially for things like kick drums, to keep that rhythm and kind of that lively lower end a bit more active. So it's very nice for rock actually. The Abyss again is faster and a little bit more detailed and also what I would consider to be cleaner. It is higher fidelity in my opinion than the Meze is, and it still hits with a decent amount of kind of presence on its own, so it doesn't sound bass light. It's just in comparison, it's the lighter sounding headphone. But that offers things like transparency and cleanliness in the bass that might be more appealing to audiophiles or people who like to hear the full range of music a little bit more than higher in one particular range, if that makes sense. When it comes to treble, bass, and mids, the Abyss seems relatively even throughout, whereas it definitely has high spots and low spots on the Meze, or at least more so. When it comes to the mid-range, this is an interesting category because for certain songs, both headphones sound better than the other one. Really just depends on what you like and what song you're listening to. If you're listening to somebody like Avi Kaplan, who has an incredibly deep and really lush voice, you might prefer that delivery, that extra warmth that's even added on top of that of the Meze Poet. It can really sound larger than life. The Abyss is a bit more kind of grounded and a bit more realistic sounding. So you feel like you're listening to an actual person rather than a recording or an altered version of their voice where it sounds, you know, more substantial than it possibly could in real life. I feel like the Abyss is a bit more honest in that category while still being very enjoyable and as far as timbre goes, very, very on point. When it comes to the upper mids, that's where these headphones really diverge in my opinion and where they start to separate and where you see benefits and big drawbacks for some headphones. When it comes to the Meze, when it comes to the upper mids and voice, they start to recess a little bit to the point where somebody who isn't as upper mid forward is gonna come across quite dull and even a little bit veiled. And when the treble pops through, that difference in volume is quite noticeable. When it comes to the Abyss, that upper mid-range to treble transition is a bit smoother and more linear and becomes a bit more pleasing to the ear. Not to mention the rise in the upper mid-range lends for a much more kind of full and complete sounding vocalist on the Abyss. Now when it comes to the Abyss, I think that the timbre here is just really on point. I feel like the Meze falls a little bit behind here for naturalness and realism, but maybe pulls ahead for things that sound a little bit unnatural, but in a good way. Sort of like a theater experience where it's not natural, but you don't really care because it's so enjoyable at what it does. Also, the smoothness of the upper mids could be an appealing factor on the Meze. If you're somebody who doesn't like a lot of upper mid-range and you prefer a bit of a softer vocalists, especially female vocalists who aren't as harsh and gritting as they sometimes can be, the Meze is going to play a little bit softer in that area, whereas the realism in the Abyss could lead to some people not liking the upper mids as much. Treble is another area that these are very different, and it mostly comes down to the speed and quality of the drivers that are being used, and you can really see the not only choice of frequency response matter a lot here, but also I'm thinking potentially because it's a reoccurring theme for both brands, maybe the driver technology that both brands are using is providing some difference here. The Abyss is notably faster. It is a more detailed sounding headphone through and through. The Meze again seems to have some darker and lighter spots in the treble response. It is a detailed headphone on its own, but in comparison to the Abyss, details is just something Abyss does extremely well. They use these giant single magnets, like this whole thing is a magnet. It's not lines of magnets, it is one big machined magnet. And I think that that strength matched with like minimal padding between you and the driver and whatever their substrate materials are, they just do details extremely well. The Meze has a bit more going on in between its driver and your actual ear. And because of that, I think that you just get a little bit less of that high fidelity sound coming through here. Another area that pulls ahead for the Abyss is going to be its timbre. So partially the speed, partially the driver technology, partially the pads that are being used. The Meze has a bit more of a plasticky timbre. So if you're listening to metallic instruments or like finishing brass instruments, it kind of leans a little bit plasticky. It doesn't really sound super, super metallic. This is where I notice it the most, is these metallics. And the Abyss just does everything very well. If you're listening to real high-end vocals, like the upper end of stuff, like ultra high-end stuff, they'll come through a bit more clear and colorful. If you're listening to metallics or orchestral stuff, it'll come in a bit more clear and colorful. When it comes to treble response, I don't really think that this is comparable. I think the Abyss is just flat out better here, regardless of preference. But the other ranges are more up to preference, in my opinion, including the next one, soundstaging. So the way that these soundstage is very different. The Abyss sounds very open and a little bit wider and is a bit more of a traditional open back experience. Whereas the Meze is a little bit more closed in, but comes with some of its own benefits like that bass strength and its surrounding ability to really cover kind of a 360-degree field and make everything sound full and thick anywhere around your head. I think the Meze does that even a little bit better than the Abyss does. The Abyss stands out for its instrument placement, its instrument isolation, and its staging ability. The Meze stands out for its ability to provide like a fullness and an intimate experience for a lot of music. So when it comes to really busy tracks, let's say the new Disturbed song, I Will Not Break, when that song really gets into it, all of the instrument separation and its ability to isolate from the vocalist, and each instrument has its own place, and it's a busy track on top of it, and it's pretty loud and like thumpy, and it needs to have a full dynamic range, I feel like the Abyss is a little bit better at separating and kind of dividing all of that. The Meze gets a little bit more lost in the sauce. Things tend to blend together a little bit, but it does provide kind of a thicker, fuller experience because of that lower end. So there are benefits and drawbacks to both sounds. So when it comes to some extra thoughts I have, when it comes to things like movies, I think I'd actually rather use the Meze. I think the lower end is a bit better suited. The sound staging is nice for movies on the Abyss though, that is true. But I do find that the bass experience on the Meze is just a little bit more impressive for movies, and it just does movies just a little bit better. When it comes to soundtracks and classical music and really audiophile based stuff, I do find the Abyss to be a better kind of overall headphone. I also think that it does a better job of separating busier tracks. However, this comes with the caveat where I actually think that most rock is a little bit better on the Meze, mostly just because of that harder hitting bass. Even on like older rock bands that don't have a lot of sub bass, this kind of comes through and provides a little bit more of a boost there than the Abyss does, and provides a thicker, more fun low end. So I think the JOAL is better for individual instrument isolation, detail retrieval, and overall clarity. I think the Poet is better for bass warmth, head texture, and kind of a punchy, fun sound. I think both have benefits and drawbacks. If I was to assign an overall winner, especially since it's actually $100 cheaper and it comes with a 10-year warranty, I do think that the Abyss is a better audiophile headphone, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be better for everyone. And unfortunately, a lot of people get mad at me for kind of picking the middle of the road opinion a lot of times. But the truth is that our ear anatomy and personal preferences are all very, very different. And what I like may not be what you like, and what you like may not be what I like. So these are kind of the differences that I saw. I think everybody would probably agree with the differences that I laid out here, but we'll land on different conclusions in terms of what they want from a headphone. So thank you very much. Make sure you subscribe for more content like this. Make sure you subscribe for the JOAL review, and click that channel link down below if you want to see the Meze review. All right, thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.